Hi, I hope you're doing super well. Thank you for watching this video. We're going to chat through all the books I read in December. So the first book I read in December is The Colorless Tsukuku and His Years of Pilgrimage by Haruki Murakami. This is a book that I have had on my TBR for quite some time. I honestly cannot remember when I bought it. Like, truly, I don't know. God, it's been years though. I've had this for a long time. This December, I decided to pick it up and finally read it, because now that I'm back in this room with all of my bookshelves, I can so clearly see all the books that I haven't read that are just sitting there. So I made it a point to read some of those on my backlist this month, and this was the first one I picked up. I had a really interesting time reading this, in that while I was reading it, I was so enthralled. The writing is amazing. So this book follows Sakura Tazaki, who is living alone in Tokyo. He's living alone and he's grappling with the fact that, like, 5 years ago, his best friends, he had a group of 5 friends who he went to high school with, and they were so close, and just seemingly out of the blue, they cut ties with him. And so he's grappling with this and the implications and the extreme reaction he had to that. Obviously that was a very upsetting thing to go through, and how that affected him in his life and still is. He's grappling with these ideas that he's not enough, that he felt like he was surrounded by colorful people, and quite literally all of their names are related to colors except for his. So he feels like he's kind of dull, and like his whole life is, you know, almost meaningless because he doesn't have this life and vibrance. So this book follows him as he goes and tries to figure out what happened years ago, and truly it's a book about friendship and heartbreak. So I had extremely positive feelings about this book when I was reading it. I felt kind of obsessed with it, just the writing and the story, and it was a lot, and I hadn't really read anything like this before. And immediately I was like, I want to go out and buy so many other books by Murakami. He has so many that I want to read, and so many that are so well known, like Kafka on the Shore and the Wind Up Bird Chronicles. Just wanted to make sure that he did write Kafka on the Shore, and he did. So I had very positive feelings. And then when I sat down to kind of write a review of it, or, you know, put a star rating on Goodreads and the story graph, I thought about it more, and there were some prevailing issues that I had with this book. I took a lot of issue with how women are portrayed in this book, but we're obviously seeing this through the lens of Sakura, and how he portrays the women in his life is how we're being introduced to them. I often find issue when I'm reading a book written by a man, to be honest, and so this one's just a little bit more distinct. It was he's thinking of this person, this woman who's supposed to mean a lot to him, a friend, anyone, and then he's like, oh, her boobs. I'm like, okay, let's calm down, sir. So there's things like that, and he has some dreams that happen, and so that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, or I just didn't love it as much. The other thing that I really didn't like about this book is quite a big spoiler, so I'll put spoiler right here, so when I'm talking about it, it'll be up there, and if you don't want to know the spoil, if you don't want to be spoiled, then just mute me until then. Maybe I'll in the description say when I'm finished talking. Anyway, so basically what happened 5 years ago was that one of his friends accused him of raping her. And for that reason, all of his friends cut him out of their lives, and he was calling them, and he was like, why aren't you talking to me? What is happening? And they were all like, you should know, you know what you did. And he's like, I literally don't. So as he goes and talks to his friends and kind of tries to figure out what, get to the bottom of it and figure out what happened, he realizes, they tell him that well, you raped her. And he was like, no, I didn't. The whole crux of what happened was that there was a false rape accusation, and even one of the friends knew that. She was like, I know that it was false, I know it wasn't true, but I had to either support her or cut you out of my life, and I chose to support her because she was going through something. I just hate that it was a false rape accusation. When women come out and say that they've been sexually assaulted or raped, there's often the response oh, she's just making it up. So I kind of think that we should just cut out any false rape accusations. Statistically hardly ever happen, and so just having any sort of story or having that mentioned just kind of increases the prevalence. I don't know, sitting with that part of the book and like having that be like, that's such a big part of it, obviously, was kind of frustrating to me. And I really don't know what to rate this. I ended up not rating it just because those facets of the book I really didn't like, but there's so many other facets that I loved so much. I don't know, it's an interesting time. Basically, where I've come to the end of it is I'm going to read another Murakami. I want to so badly, and if I feel like there is a trend of those like themes that continue throughout his books, then maybe I'll decide that like his books are not for me. So I figured let's just continue with the theme of books that have been sitting in my TBR for a while. And so the next book that I read is Fools by Joan Silber. This is a book that I bought so long ago. I bought it when I was in high school. I bought it at City Lights, which is a bookstore in San Francisco that's quite well known. I love City Lights. I purely bought it for the cover, and then it sat on my shelf for at least 6 years. But I put an end to that this year. I read it. It's read now. Anyway, I'm very proud of myself for reading this. So this is a short story cycle, which is what it says on the back. But this has, I think, 5 different stories, and they're all very loosely connected to each other. So there'll be one person from one story is like the main person in the next one. And with that, it progresses through time. So the first story is set in 1924, and then the next story follows, I think, like a child from that story. So, you know, we're getting later on in years. Is it wise to be a fool for something? So, you know, it's like something that you're so passionate about, what makes people want to be better than they are. From New York to India to Paris, from the Catholic worker movement to Occupy Wall Street, the characters in Joan Silber's dazzling new short story cycle tackle this question head on. So it's just kind of talking about the characters' main passions and interests and like their driving things and what that means for them. I thought this was a pretty okay thing. I honestly was kind of like reading it just because I wanted to like have read it. If I had known more about it, I wouldn't have picked it up. If I saw this in a bookstore now, like I wouldn't have bought it if I had known what it was about. I wasn't mad at it, it's just like not my cup of tea. So this was fine. The writing was fine. You know, like the whole thing with short stories is like some stories I like more than others. Like I did like the first one quite a bit, and then like some of them I just like could not care less about the characters. So I always struggle with short stories because I don't really know how to talk about them, because as a whole I didn't love it that much, but some of them I did love. The next book I read on audio. So I read the third and final book in the Farseer trilogy. So this is The Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. I really love the Farseer trilogy. It was just such a fun, classic fantasy story. I can't really give you a synopsis for the third book in the series, but this follows Fitz, who is a bastard of one of the princes in this kingdom. And it follows him as he grows up. So the first book follows him when I think he's starting to be, like starts when he's 6. And then this one he's 30, maybe. I don't really know how old he is. Or maybe even younger, maybe he's in his 20s. But we follow him throughout his life. So we follow him as he goes and lives in the castle. I don't know if it's a castle, but he lives where all the royals are in this kingdom. They take him in, and it follows him as he becomes an assassin and ultimately is grappling with the question of loyalty to this family line who largely doesn't really accept him, and then just doing what is best for him. Like I said, as he is training and becomes an assassin, and as he gains certain magical abilities, like one, which is my favorite, is that he can have a little animal companion. So that's my favorite. I love it when you can like create a bond with an animal and communicate with them. And so it's full of political intrigue, and one person wants the throne and no one else wants him to have the throne, and it's, you know, that kind of thing. At the end, I was just crying. I was just like trying to like wipe away my tears, because it's the end of this series and it's all these people that we've been following, like I've been following for so long, and so many pages. Like these books are chunky, so I spent so much time with like Fitz and the Fool. God, the Fool, I love him, and Night Eyes and all of these characters. So I ended it and I was like, wow, oh my god, the end of the series. And I loved it a lot right at the ending, and then after I sat through it I was like, Robin Hobb. So there are like some things I had not so much an issue with, I had an issue with something. So like one thing is we kind of leave like, not exactly half, but let's say like half of our cast of characters we had in the first 2 books. We kind of drop them in the 3rd because Fitz is traveling, which is another reason why I love this book. Oh my god, I love traveling books. My favorite. Or like if we can have like an extended scene where we're going from one place to the next, like that's by far my favorite thing. So I was like euphoric this whole book because most of it's Fitz tromping around. But because he's traveling, we leave some characters behind in like the main city, and then we kind of take on a handful of other characters. And I'm like, why? Why are we spending our time in the last book with these characters when I don't really care about them and I want to see the other people? So that was kind of frustrating. And then there were some things in that were very much like unaddressed at the end that, you know, like I can't say what I wish that we could like learn more. One of them, very distinctly, I was so mad at. There was like a group of people that Fitz found, that Fitz ran across in our travels, and they were like, come back and we'll teach you about this thing. And I was like, got it. This is my favorite thing. I want to learn more about it. It's my favorite part of the book. I want to learn. I want to spend a whole bunch of time with these people. And we never did it. And at the end, it was like, Fitz spent 3 years with these people, or yada yada. And I was like, why? Why is it off page? I want to see them. I want to be there. So that was kind of frustrating. Overall, I really liked the series. The thing with this is, this is like obviously the 3 books in the series, but then there's like 9 other books in this world, and they're like sets of trilogies. So the next one's a live ship trilogy, and they're, like I said, a set in the world, and like some of the characters will overlap. So I think some of the critiques that I have may be addressed in the other books, but you could argue like that doesn't make it a good book. Like you should be able to like have a full-fledged book in one go. But it's epic fantasy. Like I feel like those are always longer. I'm just gonna like continue going through these series and being in this world. Okay, I'm determined to make the next books like so speedy reviews. I spent so long in the first 3 books, and we're just gonna, look at us, we're gonna fly. Watch. Okay, so the next book is Christmas Stories by Charles Dickens. This was great. This was fun. Obviously I love the cover. The illustrations are great on the inside. So this has 3 Christmas stories. It has The Christmas Carol, The Chimes, and The Cricket on the Hearth. I had read The Christmas Carol before, but I had not read the other 2. This was just fun. This is exactly what I wanted. I read this, you know, obviously during Christmas time. I was like surrounded by snow. It was just the ideal time. I enjoyed it. I really like The Christmas Carol. The other ones were fun. This is definitely something that I will pick up and read in later years. The next book I read is Withering Heights by Emily Bronte. This really surprised me. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I don't know what I thought was going to happen when I went in. I kind of wanted to read it just to like get it off my TBR pile. But I really, like I said, I really enjoyed this. So this follows, oh gosh, I forgot that I was gonna have to summarize this. So this, if you don't know, Withering Heights kind of is about Heathcliff and Catherine, but it's also kind of about like so many more other people. So I thought that this was just gonna be kind of like just them and their love story, but this is not a love story. I would never say that, and whoever does, I'm like, it's a little questionable. What do you think is romance? So I think what really saved me with this book is I went in with not that many expectations. Like, even though I thought it was a love story, I was just kind of like, oh, I just know it's gonna be kind of like dark and gothic. So that's what I don't think it's gothic, but like a little dark, and that's what I want in wintertime. But yes, like I said, it follows Heathcliff and Catherine. It's just really a story of these people that live on the moors, and that, you know, Heathcliff is quite a mean man. Catherine's not really a nice woman either, but does not mean she deserves Heathcliff. But it also follows, you know, children of them. It follows them when they're kids, and then it follows their children, and then it follows, this is all being told by a maid who knew Heathcliff and Catherine. She's like telling this other guy who's trying to rent the house. Like, it's just like this whole cast of characters, but it's just kind of like about these people living on the moors in England, and they're, you know, like, I want to marry this man, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z, and there's drama, and then like Heathcliff is horrible, so he destroys things, or he's like, I'm gonna marry her out of spite. It's like this whole twisty thing, and it was so fun. It was so fun. It's interesting because I saw someone talking about it on Instagram and they were like, I did not like this book because it wasn't what I was expecting. Like, these characters are horrible people. Like, they're horrible, and, you know, like, this isn't the romance I was expecting. And like, I understand that. So I do see that if you're going into this book being like if you want it to be Pride and Prejudice, it's not Pride and Prejudice. Like, you're not really rooting for Heathcliff and Catherine to get together. At least I wasn't. Like, this isn't like the grand pairing. Like, it's not like, I even like Jane and Mr. Rochester more. Like, it's not like these people that you're really like desperate to get together. It's, I don't know, it's different than that. So I think having that perspective going in can really hinder your reading of the book. And so if you can kind of like not go in expecting that, then like you'll enjoy it more. Yeah, these people are horrible. Like, pretty much all of the people in this book do like horrible things. They make questionable decisions, they marry cousins, they, you know, like all of them except for Nellie. I would say Nellie is like the shining star of this book. She's pretty great. She's the person that is telling the story. But yes, like, the characters are horrible, and but like, that doesn't mean that I didn't like it, you know? Like, I still enjoyed this book. It's not like I'm reading it and I'm be like, I want to be like Catherine. Like, I want to find Heathcliff in my own life. Like, no, I don't. But I just enjoyed reading about these characters, and I thought they were really fun. So yes, I really enjoyed Withering Heights a lot. The next book I read is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. So basically, White Fragility is about how white people tend to get defensive and offended when racism is brought up, especially if they're being accused of racism, and how they kind of like shut down the conversation. So this is all about that, and it's all about the ways in which white people show white fragility, like what that means, and the ways in which you can combat that. I think this is a very important book to read if you are a white person. I have read a handful of books on racism in America and about like the history of racism, and I think this is a very like necessary addition to that list of, you know, specifically talking about like how white people react to this conversation and the ways in which those reactions can be detrimental and can shut down the whole conversation. There has been some conversation about certain words that she uses in this book, so I'll link a live show down below that talks about that if you're interested before you go into this. I got like quite a bit out of this book, and I, you know, took my highlighter out and I highlighted through it, and really good takeaways and action points. I really liked that she was like, this is what you can do about it. Explains why white fragility happens, the ways in which you can see and see in yourself white fragility taking place, and where all this stems from. Like I said, if you're a white person and you want to be more educated on racism, like we all should, I think that this is a good book to add to your anti-racist reading list, to just take some from and think about it and grow as a person and be better people. Okay. The next book I read is A Man Called Uve by Frederick Bachman. This was just a fun read. This was just such a good time. The main word I would describe this is heartwarming. It's just so heartwarming. I did have a good cry at the end. But it's just a cozy read, and, you know, makes you feel good. So this book follows Uve, who is an old man, an old crotchety, like grumpy old man. And it just is about his life, and it's about, you know, people in his life and how they want to make an impact and the ways in which they do that. Yeah, it's just like about a grumpy old man's heart thawing slowly throughout the book. And if that doesn't get you, then you're not gonna read it at all. Like, if that interests you at all, you should pick it up. I think it's a quick read, it's fun. Like, if you want to have like that emotional impact, like I say, it's fun, and there are like funny parts, but also like, you know, it's like, it can be like quite upsetting. This was just like a really fun time. This wasn't like life-changing or like extremely profound, but it also doesn't need to be. Like, this was just like exactly what I wanted and needed it to be. I really enjoyed it. Next book I read in December is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This was a reread for me. I read this originally in 2016, very early 2016, and I loved it a whole bunch. I loved it a lot. So I wanted to reread it because I wanted to read the second book, which you'll see is missing from the bookshelf because I'm reading it. Wow, look at me go. But So I knew that it had been so long that I didn't remember enough from the first book to read the second one. So I decided to reread this and I had a great time. I didn't read this edition. I read it on Kindle first. So I really appreciated both. I really liked having the illustrations in this. My old baby is a little sad in that picture, but so I definitely got a lot of enjoyment reading this edition in particular. But I just had a great time. I guess I should tell you what it's about. So this book follows Kvothe as he goes to a magic wizarding school. Not really wizarding school, but he goes to the academy. So if you're a fan of fantasy schools and books, highly recommend this. He spends a lot of time there. My dog just knocked over my whole pile of books on the floor. Joe, why? But yes, it follows him as he goes to the school. It follows him trying to get to the school, and he goes through trials and tribulations to get there, my God. But he is the youngest person to go to the school, and if you like the savant trope in books, like that's what this is. It has like the savant trope. Like he is extremely good at, hi Joe. He is extremely good at music and he's extremely good at his studies. He does try hard. Like he's like smart, but like he also he has a hard life. Like it's not like everything is just fine and dandy for him. He has lots of struggles. The series is 3 books. There's only 2 out right now, but each one is one day of him telling his story. So it starts with him, our main character Kvothe, being a grown-up working at an inn, and this chronicler comes and asks for Kvothe to tell him his story. So it has like an interesting set up that way, so you kind of like know some things that are coming, like will be alluded to, or he'll be like, this won't like something tragic will happen, like devastating, and he'll be like, this isn't the hardest day of my life, that is to come later. I'm like, oh my God. So the whole time you're reading this, you kind of have a sense of like dread, like it's like being told like a folktale. It's being told like, I did this and this is what happened next. Like it just gives you that sense of like, oof, it kind of like sits heavy on your chest. I really enjoyed this. I love this. I gave this 5 stars the first time I read it. I gave it 5 stars the second time I read it. My only critique is I really wish it was more diverse. Like super, like it seems like it has the trope of all the people in this fantasy world are white, which is like kind of frustrating. Not kind of, it is frustrating. Also, there's like a distinct lack of like LGBT people in this. But I will say, having just started, I'm like 100 pages into the sequel, it seems like maybe Patrick Rothfuss got those notes and has changed that a little bit. So there is like more just like casual mention of like gay people, or like just like something as easy as like women and men alike like swooned after him. Like something like that is so easy to put in just to like have that. Obviously you want main characters to be queer, but just having that in the background is better. So yes, that was my main critique of this, which is, you know, a pretty good critique. Everything else, I love the story. I love the writing. The writing is so good. I love just the fact that it's like being told to someone to write down, and also we're like having interspersed like every like 100 pages or so, we stop and we go to when the story is being written. This was the first, I think, like full adult fantasy book that I'd ever read, so it is accessible in that route if you're wanting to get into fantasy, but there's so many of them and they're kind of intimidating. I would recommend this. I just took my laptop away from Joe and he is glaring at me like that was my pillow, when I have so many pillows for him to lay on and like blankets and stuff. The next book I read is In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. This is a Christmas rom-com, as well as May, who is stuck in a Groundhog Day type of situation. Every year, her and her family go to this cabin with family friends and spend Christmas. And this Christmas just like did not go well. Like everything kind of went wrong. The family who owns the cabin said that they're gonna sell it that next year. And so like she's just like so upset. There's just like not a lot of things going right in her world. So on her way to the airport, she kind of like sends a wish out to the universe and she's like show me what I need to do to be happy, basically. So she then wakes up and she's on her way to the cabin. So she's reliving this section of time. I think it's like the week before and of Christmas, and that's what it's about. It's a romance. She, you know, has been pining over this one guy and it didn't work out that one time, so she's like retrying it every time. It's it's pretty fine. I mean, now it's after Christmas, but for next year, if you're looking for, you know, like kind of like a Hallmark Christmas movie in a book type situation, I do recommend it. I will say, of the ones that I've read, I think I've read 2 others that are like Christmas romances. This is by far the best. The other ones I did not enjoy at all. This one I enjoyed enough to give 3 stars. It's just pretty okay. I wasn't super invested in the characters. I wasn't really like rooting for our main pairing to get together. I will say, like, I think I kind of understand why most Groundhog Day stories are movies, because it just like didn't go off as well in a book, because you don't get like the fun montages. Like, I feel like there's lots of things that you need to do visually for a Groundhog Day story that you just can't do in a book. The next book I read in December is The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman. This is a sequel to The Golden Compass and in the Historic Materials series. I did not like this as much as the first one, like pretty much at all, which is really upsetting because I really enjoyed the first one a lot. I will say I think like a main reason why I didn't like it is because, is this a spoiler? Not really, it's vague enough. So like in this series, in this world, there's different worlds. So we start this off in our world, like with technology and everything, and I immediately was like, this is not what I want. So this is like less a critique of the book itself, and it's just like, this is not what I want. So like greatly impacted my enjoyment of the reading experiences, because I just wanted to be in a fantasy world, and it wasn't really that. I mean, we got fantasy and we jumped between worlds, which was fun, but I just like wanted something different, which isn't the fault of the book, but it's just like the reality. It was fine. I'm gonna read the 3rd one at some point. We'll see. The next book I read is The World of Wonders by Amy Nezuko Mattatale. This is a book I got for Christmas, and I just want to highlight how gorgeous this is. And throughout the book, there's more beautiful illustrations. Like, this was such a fun reading experience. So this is a collection of short stories that are each is like themed around another facet, around a facet of nature. Like, one of them is on fireflies, one of them is on a jellyfish, one of them is on the flower touch me nots, or the plant touch me not, one of them is on monsoons, another one's on the octopus. So she tells these stories and connects them to nature in some ways. While writing, she gives you like information on these animals. Like, for example, my favorite one that I'd like tabbed in here is about she talks about how when she was young, I think maybe she was like in 2nd grade, she was told to draw like an animal that she really likes. So she drew a peacock. And she was talking about how that means a lot to her and her culture, and like how she saw them a lot in India when she'd go and visit. But the teacher reacted very poorly, and she was like, you can't draw peacock, like only draw animals that are in the United States, like we want American animals. And like so it's like she talked about how that experience impacted her as like a young child, and how it made her like, you know, start to dislike this thing that she used to love so much because she was told by an authority figure that like it's not good or American. So she tells these stories like from her life. It's kind of like a memoir, and connects it to these, like I said, facets of nature. I really, really enjoyed the writing of this. She has an incredible writing style. And again, like I said, the illustrations are just so beautiful. So she is a poet too, and I will look into her poetry. I will say sometimes the connection to the facets of nature seemed a little like, they seemed like loosely connected. So it was kind of like she knew that she wanted to make this, have it be connected to each, like, to like something, but she had to like kind of force the connection. And so I will say like sometimes that kind of like impacted it a bit for me. Yes, I really liked the writing. Obviously it was a very short read, but I enjoyed it a lot. But yes, thank you, Canellen, for giving this to me for Christmas. I loved the writing. Okay, that's it. We've made it. This was way longer than it needed to be. I really struggle with wrap-ups. Apparently I need to make it snappy, and I'm just not good at that. But I did read quite a bit in December, and I'm really excited to keep reading throughout the new year and find some more really good books. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you later with my next one. Bye. I love the lights on my bookshelf, but they really kind of make it difficult to get books out sometimes.